All right, today we're diving into something that might just flip your whole understanding of insulin resistance completely on its head. What if I told you it might not be a disease at all, but actually your body's own very smart, deliberate plan to protect itself from a much deeper crisis?
So let's just kick things off with a pretty wild question. This whole framework asks us to imagine that the high blood sugar we've all been taught to fear is actually a calculated response, a survival mechanism deployed by an incredibly intelligent system.
Right, we all know the standard story, don't we? You eat too many carbs, your cells get overwhelmed, they start ignoring insulin, and boom, sugar builds up in your blood. It sounds simple enough, but the perspective we're exploring today turns that entire idea completely upside down. What if it's not a malfunction at all? This theory argues that high blood sugar is the body's purposeful, life-saving medicine. It's like the fire extinguisher being deployed to put out a really dangerous fire that's raging deep inside your body. So, what is this internal fire? Well, to really get this, you've got to picture your body as this dynamic battlefield. There are two huge opposing energy systems inside you, and they are constantly at war for resources and for control. So on one side, you have the brain system. Think of it as the cool or yin system. It's your central command, running the whole nervous system, and its main fuel is sugar, glucose. Then on the complete other side of the ring, you've got the bone marrow system. This is the hot or yang system. This is the engine for your physical strength, for healing, and it runs on fat and protein. Now this is where it gets really interesting. The pancreas? In this model, its main job isn't what you think. It's actually the command center for that entire hot bone marrow system. It produces insulin specifically to process the fats and proteins that power up this internal engine. And that changes everything. From this point of view, a pancreas that's pumping out a ton of insulin isn't a sign of a problem, not at all. It's the sign of a really powerful, high-energy bone marrow system. It's an indicator of physical strength, not sickness. Okay, so a powerful engine is good, right? But what happens when that engine gets pushed way, way too hard? What happens when that internal furnace just gets cranked up to 11? Well, it kicks off when that very strong pancreas sends out this massive surge of insulin. This acts like a supercharger, just flooding the bone marrow system with energy from fats and proteins. And this huge energy surge creates an incredible amount of internal heat. The body goes into a serious metabolic overdrive. And we're not just talking about feeling a little warm here. No way. The sources for this framework say this process can literally raise your core body temperature to 37.5 or even 38 degrees Celsius. I mean, your body is actually truly overheating from the inside out. And folks, this is a code red emergency. Seriously, that cool brain system we just talked about, it is extremely sensitive to changes in temperature. It just cannot handle this kind of heat. This is a direct and immediate threat to its survival. So, how does the body respond to this life-threatening situation? It doesn't panic. It has a protocol. It launches this brilliant emergency countermeasure to save its most critical asset. The brain basically slams the big red emergency button. It sends an urgent command directly to the liver, ordering it to deploy its strategic reserves, and to do it now. The liver gets the order to release its strategic reserve of coolant directly into the bloodstream to handle the emergency. And what is that emergency coolant, you ask? And here it is, the core idea of this whole thing. That emergency coolant is sugar. The liver dumps glucose into the bloodstream on purpose. This isn't a mistake. It's a deliberate, calculated action to bring the body's internal temperature back down and save the brain from overheating. So if all of that is true, it leads to a pretty huge conclusion in this framework, that we have been mistakenly lumping two completely different, in fact opposite conditions together under the very same name. On one side, you've got what is often called type 2, which this framework defines as a crisis of heat, driven by too much insulin from an overactive pancreas. On the other side is a crisis of cold, caused by not enough insulin from a weak pancreas. One body is overheating and using sugar to cool down. The other is freezing because it lacks fuel and has to discard the sugar it can't use. They are polar opposites. So it makes sense that the physical signs tell two completely different stories. In the heat protocol, body temperature is high, urine is dark and infrequent, and there's a tendency to gain weight. But in the cold crisis, it's the exact opposite. Body temperature is low, urine is clear and very frequent, and there's rapid weight loss. This theory emphasizes that the method of testing reveals the whole story. A blood test showing high sugar simply means the body is actively using that sugar as a coolant. But a urine test showing sugar, that means the body is actively throwing away a fuel source it can no longer process. Okay, so let's follow this logic. If what we often call type 2 is really an energy imbalance rather than a disease of sugar, then what are we supposed to do about it? What's the goal? Well, the objective isn't to fight your body's response or to artificially force the sugar down. Instead, it's to help the body restore its natural balance. The goal is to address the root cause. You need to cool down the overheated hot system and, at the same time, provide the right kind of fuel for the cool brain system. Which, of course, leads us to the final and most important question. If the answer isn't just about cutting out sugar, then what is it? How do we use nutrition to actually help the body find its equilibrium again? And that is exactly what we are going to explore in our next explainer. Join us as we dive into the specific foods this framework suggests to cool the internal heat, fuel the brain, and help restore your body's own incredible self-regulating balance. Trust me, you are not going to want to miss it.